I had a Bible passage come to my mind, and I thought it was relevant for the moment that we're living in. It's in 2 Samuel, and when you look at 2 Samuel chapter 23, you see this long list of things that David's mighty men did, and it's just a list of their exploits and how great they were. And then in 2 Samuel chapter 24, David decides to take account of his men, to take a census. That was a problem. His general Joab tried to convince him not to do that. David insisted on doing it anyway. And the problem was that the Jewish law required that if you had a census, you had to make atonement for each person counted. You had to make a sacrifice of atonement. David didn't do that, and so he violated the law, and a prophet came to him and confronted him about it after he had done it. Why did he do that? In light of all the exploits of his men, you have to say that we're dealing with pride here. He wanted to be able to say, this is how many men I had, when we did all these things. And David was given 3 choices in terms of punishments. He was told that Israel could face 3 years of famine, or 3 months of running from their enemies, or 3 days of plague. And his response was that he was distressed, but that he chose the 3 days of plague, and he said, let me fall into the hands of the Lord. I don't want to run from my enemies. I don't want famine. Just let me fall into the hands of the Lord. Sickness is something that has been with us since the garden. And I think the most specific thing that you can say with certainty is that sickness is in the world because sin is in the world. Adam and Eve ate the mango, or the grapefruit, whatever it was. They picked off the tree of knowledge of good and evil. They ate that fruit, and sickness entered the world with sin, and we've been stuck with it since then. I hear people say, when it's your time, and I'll be perfectly honest. I don't believe that. I believe there are things you can do to make your life shorter or longer, and I think that there are plenty of people who stand before God, and God looks at them and says, why are you here? I had more things for you to do. I don't think that most drug addicts that die because it's their time. They're taken before their time. I don't think when babies are aborted that it's their time. I think that human beings play a role of some kind, and I can't explain it perfectly, but you understand what I'm saying. But if you want to see this virus in a spiritual context, consider this. David's sin, the sin of Israel over and over again, was the sin of pride and self-reliance. If you want to find a parallel here, consider that, it's this. In spite of abortion, in spite of the amount of sexual immorality that there is in America, in spite of the greed that our economic system breeds, in spite of the addictions that we deal with and we face, America's biggest sin is still pride. It's our national pride. And we need to consider the possibility that God is not concerned with the greatness of America, and that instead he might be more concerned with the fulfillment of the Great Commission. We think the life of an American is more precious, more valuable than a child from Guatemala, or a woman from Syria, or a refugee from Myanmar who's stuck in Bangladesh now. And we say so all the time. And I think it grieves God when we make that comparison and we think in those terms. We think that we can make this world into what we want it to be with our own strength, and that we have built something in terms of wealth and prestige that we have a right to brag about. And we don't mention God much when we talk about the greatness of America. Excuse me. I hear people right now quoting Second Chronicles 7:14 a lot, and that's the verse that says, "If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray." But I think that when we quote that verse, we think that God is going to restore us to the level of pride and prestige that we had before this started. We don't understand what it means to humble ourselves. And I think that using that verse means taking our national pride and laying it on the altar and saying, whatever you think is good for America, God, let's do that. God will restore not our previous state, but our relationship with Him. That's the point. That's what that verse says to me. In the words of King David at this point, if you want to see this in a spiritual context, let me fall into the hands of the Lord, because His mercy is great.